everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. We're going to spend some time on the Manafort trial that's taking place. It's quite fascinating, actually, as well as other things, of course. But, I got to thinking, as I read and read and read, and I look on various blog sites and websites and so forth, I got to thinking. People talk about, and many people are talking about and writing about, the coming Civil War. Victor Davis Hanson has written about it. Others. I've talked about it. I talked about it during the Tea Party, the height of the Tea Party movement. Other people poo-poo this kind of talk. Let me tell you what's going on. Prior to the Reagan era, the effort to push back on statist progressivism was almost non-existent. There were a few people, a few intellectuals, a few books, a few magazines that did it. Bo Buckley leading the way. The nomination of Barry Goldwater, so forth. There was some excellent books. But it wasn't really until Reagan that the pushback began. And then after the Reagan presidency, where he built a foundation based on the principles of Americanism, that once again the establishment, in this case the subsequent Bush administration, and then of course the Bush 43 administration, reverted back to the old Republican progressivism of Theodore Roosevelt in many respects. They abandoned Reagan conservatism. The spending that occurred, at least in that time under the Bush administration, was enormous. I don't believe he ever vetoed a spending bill. If he did, it was maybe one. The government massively increased, followed by Barack Obama. The government not only massively increased, but Barack Obama was into fundamentally transforming America into this Ameritopia based on statist progressivism. The Tea Party rose up at the end of the Bush administration, George W. Bush, and the beginning of the Obama administration. It didn't rise up just because of the election of Obama. It rose spontaneously because of decade after decade of statist progressivism. And many citizens across the country, many of you, then and now, and I, realize that we've reached a point that we must push back. We must push back because there are elements and forces within our society that want to take us even further, away from our constitutional system, away from our founding principles, and away from private property and capitalism. If you think this is just something to debate and discuss, and that's very, very important, ideas are crucial. But if you think that's it, that's not correct. You need activists. You need organizations. You need strategies. You need tactics. You need resources. You need people on the ground. You need a grassroots. We always talk about ideas here. I write about ideas in all my books. And those ideas need to be husbanded into action. And some people, I think, liberal, conservative, whatever you want to call them, they sit at their desk and they intellectualize this, which is fine. We do that too. But they don't really get it. It's really not about persuading statist progressive intellectuals that they're wrong. It's really not about persuading them to join us It's really not about persuading Chuck Schumer that he's wrong, because Chuck Schumer is not operating from a rational position. He's operating from a position where he seeks power, and he's power hungry. And many other people, the same thing, in different walks of life. So what we're trying to do is, both intellectually and from a grassroots perspective, organize people who still believe in our founding principles. It's fascinating that the left, and they do this all the time, has stolen our nomenclature, the resistance. What are they resisting exactly? They've created this federal leviathan. They've created the welfare state. They've created the notion of redistribution of wealth within a free society. What is it that they're resisting? They are resisting your pushback. You see, the way I view it, this statist progressivism is a counter-revolution to the American Revolution. How do I know that? Because the earliest intellectuals in that movement told us so. They rejected the Declaration, and they abhor the Constitution. They've written about it. I've written about them in my latest book, Rediscovering Americanism and the Tyranny of Progressivism. We must not be Pollyannas in the face of what's taking place in this country. This country is too important. Our security as individuals is too important. The civil society is too important. I don't particularly care what some of the people on quote-unquote the other side have to say. And we have to have civil debate. We're all about civil debate. We're also about civil activism. The Tea Party was civil activism. The rise and election of Ronald Reagan was civil activism. There's no Antifa equivalent in the conservative movement or in the Republican Party. Republicans and conservatives aren't going around on college campuses insisting that only certain people with certain viewpoints should speak, or that there should be a monopoly on commencement speakers. Republicans and conservatives aren't doing that. Republicans and conservatives don't control the vast majority of so-called free speech that takes place in the media today. There's a couple of outlets. But the overwhelming, the vast majority of these outlets in no way reflect Republican or conservative viewpoints. And so there's this pushback. Now, we can go quietly into the land of Ameritopia. We can go quietly into the land where the Bill of Rights are eviscerated, quietly into the land of centralized autocracy, or we can fight it. I'm not talking about guns and knives. I'm talking about fight it, organize against it. This is why I've written the books that I've written. The first book I ever wrote was called Men in Black. It was about the tyranny of judicial activists and activist courts. What else can you say? How else do you define it? It was the biggest selling book on the Supreme Court 20, 30, 40 years. The next book I wrote, of course, was Rescuing Sprite, probably my favorite book. The third book I wrote was Liberty and Tyranny. Liberty and Tyranny, a book that had always been in the back of my mind, but was particularly poignant given events that were taking place. And I wrote that book over a 16-month period. After I would work at Landmark Legal Foundation as president on the weekends, I would work on the book. Late at night, I would work till 2 or 3 in the morning on the book, did all the research, all the writing, which I always do all the writing. And I finished that book and I said, well, I don't know if anybody's going to be interested, anybody's going to buy it, but I think it makes an important case for conservatism and anti-conservatism. For the former, against the latter. The book exploded into the culture. It sold 1.5 million copies in all forms. It came out as the Tea Party was just given birth. It was a book that Tea Party activists read. It was a book that Tea Party activists brought to their rallies. Jeffrey Lord wrote at the American Spectator that it was one of the most important books, period. And it had an enormous effect. I know what it means to make the case for ideas, but I also know what it means to organize, to be activists. That is, do more than talk. After I wrote Liberty and Tyranny, I'm doing this for a reason. After I wrote Liberty and Tyranny, I wrote a book called Ameritopia, going into some of the great philosophers from whom our founders and framers borrowed their ideas, and some of the not-so-great philosophers who serve as the foundational thinkers for the statist progressives. Then I said, okay, but we need more than that. What can we do? We keep voting Republicans. We keep doing what good citizens do as activists. There was this idea in Article 5 of our Constitution that there's 2 ways to amend the Constitution. I bet you didn't know there's really 3 ways to amend the Constitution. One of the ways is completely illegitimate, and that is the Supreme Court, which constantly rewrites the Constitution. That is tyrannical. Goes back to my first book. But the framers provided 2 legitimate ways for amending the Constitution. It can be initiated by Congress or it can be initiated by the state legislatures. All the amendments to the Constitution have been initiated by Congress. None of them, up till now, have been initiated by the states. Now we have people, so-called conservatives, who object to that. They believe the only way that we should be able to amend the Constitution is through the Congress. Well, we're not going to amend it to have term limits, to limit borrowing, to limit taxes, to limit spending, to limit regulations. That is, to limit the power that Congress has seized for itself and then provided to these departments and agencies that it has created. The idea that we're going to be able to limit them by waiting for Congress to give us a chance to fix the situation is, of course, nonsensical, irrational. Absolutely irrational. And so, I wrote the Liberty Amendments. I used to be opposed to the notion of a convention of states, and I actually studied it. It is quintessential federalism. And it's in the Constitution. And it was put there for a reason. As a matter of fact, James Madison, who could see the coming bloody Civil War as states, slave states and free states, were starting to battle with each other, not militarily, but in the press and so forth, he pointed to Article 5 Convention of States as a way to address this in order to avoid a civil war. Hamilton refers to it in the Federalist Papers, even though initially he was not all that fond of it. Initially I wasn't fond of it. Now I'm very fond of it. So we wrote the Liberty Amendments, and that helped spur another movement with what's headed by Mark Meckler and others at the Convention of States organization. And so you and I have been involved in a number of movements here, the Tea Party movement and the Convention of State movement. Then I thought to myself, okay, we've dealt with the philosophical. We've dealt with the Constitution. How about we get to some real facts about what's happening to our government and the implication for our children, grandchildren, and generations yet born, because it is dire. Absolutely dire. The debt, unfunded liabilities, they're out of control, and they will crush the society. So particularly for younger people and parents and grandparents who care, I wrote Plunder and Deceit. Every one of these are New York Times #1 bestsellers. Then finally, I'm not doing Mark, This Is Your Life. Stick with me. I may have to take a break, but I'm going to explain it in a minute. Then the last book I wrote was Rediscovering Americanism and the Tyranny of Progressivism. Well, where did we get these principles from in the Declaration of Independence? What do they mean? Why are they so important? And it's time to better define who it is that we're battling. The counter-revolutionaries. Who are they? Where do they get their ideas from? Who are their intellectuals? To lay it out even more boldly than in Ameritopia. Now, why is all this important? I'll explain when I return. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
The battle of ideas is absolutely critical. I mean, we should know, right? Because we talk about ideas all the time here. And I write about it. Every book I've written is about ideas. But it doesn't end there. That's not enough. Tyranny does exist. It exists in the world. It exists in the hearts of certain individuals. And free societies do not survive in perpetuity. The founders of this country understood that, the framers of the Constitution understood that, and we need to understand that. And so it's important to be passionate. Wise, but passionate. It's important to have a base of people in this country who share our values, our principles, and our belief systems. It's not enough to talk. You have to act responsibly, but you have to act. I'll be right back.
You know what they say about getting a good night's sleep? It's the good part I was having trouble with. I'd have a hard time.
CNN, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard forces are expected to begin a major exercise in the Persian Gulf as soon as within the next 48 hours that could be aimed at demonstrating their ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, according to 2 U.S. officials directly familiar with the latest U.S. assessment of their troop movements. We are aware of the increase in Iranian naval operations within the Arabian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, and Gulf of Oman. We're monitoring it closely and will continue to work with our partners to ensure freedom of navigation and free flow of commerce in international waterways, Captain William Urban, chief spokesman for the U.S. Central Command. Now, the strait is a strategically critical passageway linking the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea that is crucial to international shipping and particularly for global energy supplies. While the U.S. sees no immediate signs of hostile intent from Iran, the Iranian show of force has U.S. military intelligence deeply concerned for 3 fundamental reasons, according to officials. 1, the exercise comes as rhetoric from the Iranians towards the U.S. has accelerated in recent days. 2, it appears they're ramping up for a larger exercise this year than similar efforts in the past. 3, the timing is unusual. These types of Iranian exercises typically happen much later in the year. There's major concern because of these factors, one official said. As of now, the U.S. assesses the Iranians have assembled a fleet of more than 100 boats, many of them small, fast-moving vessels. It's expected Iranian air and ground assets, including coastal defensive missile batteries, could be involved. Hundreds of Iranian troops are expected to participate, and some regular Iranian forces could be involved as well. The Iranian exercise comes as the U.S. has only one major warship, the USS the Sullivans, inside the Persian Gulf, several officials say. Other U.S. warships are nearby. There are numerous combat aircraft in the region. The U.S. military has been trying to encourage other nations in the region, especially Saudi Arabia, to take a strong line on keeping the Gulf open in the face of rising Iranian rhetoric. They've also expressed concern about keeping open the waterways off Yemen, where Iranian-backed rebels have attacked oil tankers. Secretary of Defense James Mattis, responding to rising Iranian rhetoric, said Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. They've done that previously in years past. They saw the international community put dozens of nations of international community, put their naval forces in for exercises to clear the straits. Clearly, this would be an attack on international shipping, and it would have obviously an international response to reopen the shipping lanes with whatever that took. There's more. If I can pull it up, let's see here. The Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu, I can't pull the article up, that's okay. He has announced that they will keep the Red Sea open no matter what, under all conditions, whatever it takes, the Israelis and the international community. And so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The Islamo-Nazi regime in Iran, the economy dying, the people, in many respects, rising up, the mullahs, the fundamentalist Islamic mullahs, who've divided that country up economically like warlords, they seek to hold on to their power. And so it may come to this. Now let's see about the isolationists in our own country. Some of them on cable TV. What is it? What's in our business there? What's our business? It's called oil, geniuses. It's more than that. One country gets away with this, other countries do the same thing. Boy, why are people so stupid? They just are. The isolationists, some of whom are on cable. The isolationists, some of whom do not support increasing defense spending in a significant way, like the Koch brothers. The what I call the Code Pink Republicans out there, who think if you want a robust United States military, not for aggressive interventionism, but to do what the United States military needs to do or should do, that somehow you must be a neocon or a globalist. Well, let me tell you something. President of the United States is neither. And I'm sure he, his brilliant National Security Advisor Bolton, his brilliant Secretary of State Pompeo, and Mattis, not so brilliant, but what the hell. I'm sure all three of them are well aware of what's going on. I'm sure the brilliant ambassador to Israel from the United States, Friedman, I'm sure the brilliant ambassador to the United States from Israel, Dermer, I'm sure they're all quite familiar. And then the Churchill of our times, as I call him, Netanyahu, there's no question about it. So the Iranians are on the move. What this portends, we cannot be 100% certain. But 100 ships is 100 ships. 100 military naval ships, that's not a joke. We, the United States, we only have about 300. Less than 300, actually. And Trump's trying to rebuild our Navy as he is the rest of the branches of the military. All right, you can kill the music. Thank you. So that's the breaking news, and it's a big deal. That's why I have no stomach for the Code Pink Republicans. You know, it's an amazing thing. You can learn so much from history. You really can. Even recent history. What happens when the United States has its guard down? What happens when the United States slashes its military spending and its military resources? We tend to have wars. And we tend to lose a lot more lives than we would otherwise lose if we were ready. Now, what I've just reported to you has been reported by CNN and in some international news outlets, but it hasn't led news anywhere. Not on network news, not on cable news. Instead, we go this back and forth. Trump tweeted this, Adam Schiff says that, Ernie Grabatsky says this, and it's just, our free press is so pathetic. They have no sense of priorities, and they're just endlessly pushing their ideological agenda. It's really quite amazing. We can learn from history not to have a massive debt. We can learn from history to ensure we have a strong military. We can learn from history to butt out of most economic decisions. We can learn from history that you must have a nation state and secure borders, or your country will be overrun. Its culture will be destroyed. It'll be destroyed from within. It's the history of Rome. We can learn from history, but we don't. Because everybody thinks the world begins today. The statist progressives reject history. We have some newbies in the conservative movement. They reject the past. It's really quite appalling. Anyway, I thought you'd want to know. Now, part of the problem with the media, of course, is they talk about a free press. Tell me, does a free press, that is, a press that's really interested in trying to report the news, does it hire overwhelmingly people from a prior administration? There's a great piece, I believe it's at the Daily Caller. And by the way, Chuck Todd over Meet the Depressed and NBC has decided that the Daily Caller is not a real news outlet. Chuck Todd of the staff of Tom Harkin, former left-wing kook Democrat senator from Iowa, and his wife is an active Democrat. Chuck Todd now gets to decide what is or is not a news organization. Maybe Chuck Todd can provide us with a definitive definition. Maybe he can do that. But who the hell died and named him the king of the media? You're not, you little creep. And nobody watches your damn show anyway. Meet the Press. What a joke. That's why I call it Meet the Depressed. Why, Chuck Todd's the press? Look at the ego these fools have. CNN personalities have repeatedly attacked Fox News. And let me just stop there. Fox News, by far, has the highest cable ratings. MSNBC isn't even close. CNN is so far behind, it's not even funny. So CNN has as one of its primary goals to keep attacking Fox hosts, particularly Hannity, in order to try and tear them down to build themselves up. That's what CNN's objective is. MSNBC is just, it's like watching an insane asylum. Just one kook after another roams through there, one after the other after another. And there's an audience for that. There are kooks out there, and they have the kook audience. CNN personalities have repeatedly attacked Fox News for allegedly being a mouthpiece for President Trump, pointing to a number of Fox anchors and pundits who have joined the administration over the past half year. CNN has its own. Now, that's different, you see. Somebody leaving the media to join an administration, fine. But people leaving an administration to join the media, whoa. I don't think that's so fine. CNN has its own extensive history of being a revolving door for the Obama administration, and even masquerading former Obama officials as impartial journalists. CNN's current chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto, we've talked about this fool before, served in the Obama administration as the senior advisor to the U.S. ambassador to China. And CNN employs, despite having an obvious conflict of interest in foreign policy reporting, particularly on issues relating to China, Sciutto is often presented on the network as an objective reporter. He's reported on the Iran deal, the United States deal to save China's ZTE, other international stories without CNN ever indicating Sciutto's bias. And Sciutto's bias, as part of the Obama administration, has made its way into his reporting before. In 2017, Sciutto claimed that the Obama administration cared more about, quote, civilian casualties, unquote, than the Trump administration. In February 2018, he falsely claimed that the Steele dossier was first funded by Republicans and refused to issue a retraction or correction after the Daily Caller pointed out his mistake. This May, he made sure to point out that the closest U.S. allies opposed Trump leaving the Iran deal. John Kirby, who served as the State Department spokesperson and Pentagon press secretary during the Obama administration, appears on CNN as a military and diplomatic analyst. Kirby's always identified by his former titles while appearing on the network, but CNN often fails to identify his connection to Obama. Kirby was never identified as an Obama official during a July 11 appearance, as he slammed Donald Trump for not denouncing Russia strongly. While Kirby's role is to provide political commentary, not objective reporting, it is odd that he's afforded free rein to attack the president without viewers ever being informed about his political associations. CNN Justice reporter Laura Jarrett boasts a familial connection to the Obama administration. Her mother is Valerie Jarrett, former senior advisor to Obama. Jarrett's biography indicates she had no reporting experience prior to joining CNN, yet the network tasked her with covering Trump's Department of Justice. According to the Media Research Center, CNN has conducted at least 7 interviews with Valerie Jarrett, wherein the host never disclosed that her daughter works for the network. CNN's cozy relationship with the Obama White House has worked in the opposite direction as well. In 2009, Sasha Johnson, a senior political producer of the network, left to join the administration as press secretary for the Department of Transportation. During her time at CNN, Johnson covered the 2008 Obama campaign extensively. After 10 and a half years at CNN, which included 3 presidential campaigns, I'm ready for a new challenge and ready to fulfill another career goal. The opportunity to work in public policy, Johnson said in an email to colleagues at the time of her departure. Also, former CNN war correspondent Anish Raman quit his job and became an intern for the Obama campaign in 2008, eventually serving as Obama's domestic policy speechwriter. To bear witness up close to that kind of historic campaign and to be part of it, even in a small way, was something singular, Raman said in an interview with Assam News. In addition to serving as objective reporters and analysts, other Obama officials joined CNN to provide partisan political commentary. Former senior advisor for strategy and communications, Dan Pfeiffer, former press secretary Jay Carney, former national security advisor Samantha Vinograd, former deputy national security advisor Tony Blinken have all served as CNN contributors or analysts at one time or another. CNN also recently hired former director of national intelligence James Clapper after he was suspected of leaking classified information to its journalists. According to a House intelligence report released in April, Clapper acknowledged speaking with CNN reporter Jake Tapper. And of course, who's Jake Tapper? Jake Tapper worked for Marjorie Mezvinsky. Her campaign. Remember her? Big-time Democrat? Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. He also was a spokesman for Handgun Control Inc. Jake Tapper. And his wife's a big lib, too. Hey, just got to get it out there. Former FBI agent Josh Campbell similarly raised eyebrows when he joined CNN after very publicly leaving the FBI and blaming his resignation on President Trump. And he served at the FBI from 2008 to 2018, a.k.a. during Obama's era. And his closeness with former Director Comey and his relative inexperience in the field raised questions as to whether CNN hired him to provide real expertise or to give the network more ammo. And it goes on. And it goes on. There's your CNN. That's why they're in last place. You know, you're destroying freedom of the press here. No, you are. You're a bunch of clowns. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.